I sat at the long table, my hand trembling as I held the heavy fountain pen. Across from me sat my older brother, Caleb, looking sharp in a suit that cost more than my car. Next to him was my mother, Sylvia, her face like stone. "It's been 15 years, Tessa," Caleb said, his voice smooth but cruel. He tapped the document in front of me, a presumption of death affidavit. "The girl is dust. Stop holding this family hostage with your grief. Sign the paper so we can save the company." Before we continue, if you love our stories, do well to encourage us by hitting the like button, sharing, and subscribing for more. My name is Tessa Thorpe. I'm 32 years old, a landscape architect, and a woman who has spent every single day of the last 15 years looking for a ghost. My daughter Lily vanished when she was 3. It is exactly 3 days before her 18th birthday. If I don't sign this paper declaring her dead, her $5 million trust fund stays frozen. If I do sign, the money goes to Caleb. "Mother," I whispered, looking for an ounce of support. Sylvia didn't even blink. "Do what needs to be done, Tessa. Don't be selfish." Broken and outnumbered, I lowered the pen. I felt the nib touch the paper. I was about to erase my daughter's existence to satisfy their greed. Buzz. My phone vibrated violently against the glass table. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from the genetic ancestry app I had uploaded my DNA to 4 years ago. The screen lit up with a single terrifying alert. "Immediate family match found. Daughter." My room blurred, and suddenly I wasn't in a law firm anymore. I was back in the park on that sunny Tuesday 15 years ago. The smell of fresh-cut grass and exhaust fumes filled my nose. I was 17, a struggling single mom trying to juggle high school and a baby. I had turned my back for 10 seconds, just 10 seconds to throw a dirty diaper into the trash can 3 feet away. When I turned back, the world ended. The stroller was empty. The pink blanket was still warm, but Lily was gone. I remembered the visceral panic, the way I screamed until my throat bled. But mostly, I remembered what happened when the police arrived. My mother didn't hug me. She stood by the police cruiser, arms crossed, shaking her head. "She was always irresponsible," she told the officer, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "She's a child raising a child. I told her this would happen." From that moment on, the narrative was set. I wasn't the victim. I was the negligent teen mom who lost the family heir. They planted the seed of doubt in everyone's mind, ensuring that the police looked at me instead of looking for her. I blinked, snapping back to the cold conference room. I stared at the phone notification, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked up at Caleb's smug, impatient face. He had no idea that the dust had just come back to life. I had to get out of that room. If Caleb saw the notification, he would find a way to spin it, or worse, make it disappear. I dropped the pen as if my fingers had gone numb. I grabbed my chest, forcing my breathing to become shallow and ragged. I can't breathe," I gasped, channeling the unstable persona they loved to mock. "I need air. Just give me a minute." Before they could stop me, I grabbed my phone and bolted into the hallway. I didn't go far. I ducked into the alcove near the restrooms and pressed my ear against the cracked door of the conference room. "For God's sake," Caleb's voice boomed, no longer smooth. "She's stalling, Sylvia. We don't have time for her drama." "Calm down," the lawyer said nervously. "She has until the birthday." "I don't have until the birthday," Caleb slammed his hand on the table. "The creditors are calling every hour. If I don't have access to that trust fund by Friday, the company is insolvent. I'm looking at bankruptcy, maybe even fraud charges for the loans I took out against assets I don't legally own yet." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just greed. Caleb had driven our grandfather's real estate empire into the ground. He needed Lily to be dead. He was desperate, and a desperate man is a dangerous man. "Get her back in here," Caleb snarled. "If she doesn't sign by the party, I'm declaring her mentally incompetent and signing it myself." I didn't go back into the room. I ran to the elevator, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and didn't stop until I was locked inside my car 3 blocks away. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I opened the app. It wasn't a glitch. The match was solid. User, Rose Doe 05. Relation, daughter. Shared DNA, 50%. I clicked on the profile, desperate for details. A small bio caught my eye. Kit was a gift from a friend for my 18th birthday, aging out of the system soon and looking for biological relatives. My heart broke. She was in the system. The location was tagged at a foster processing center in Oakhaven, a town 3 hours north. My brain started firing rapidly, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. The police in our town had closed the case within a year, claiming she likely wandered off and fell into the river, though no body was ever found. Caleb and the police chief were golf buddies. If Lily, now calling herself Rose, was in the system 3 hours away, it meant she hadn't died. She had been taken. I realized with a sick feeling that I couldn't call the police. Not yet. If I alerted anyone in this town, Caleb would know within minutes. He would intercept her. He would bury this before I could ever see her face. I started the engine. I had to do this alone. I typed a text to Caleb, my fingers flying. "I'm sorry. I just need to say goodbye properly. I'll sign everything at the birthday party in 3 days. Please just give me this time." It was a lie, but it would buy me the time I needed to find my daughter. The drive to Oakhaven felt like an eternity. I parked my sedan down the street from the address listed on the public foster registry. It was a rundown group home with peeling white paint and a lawn more dirt than grass. I sat there for hours, watching the door, terrified that I was wrong, terrified that this was some cruel prank. Then the front door opened. A girl walked out, slinging a worn backpack over one shoulder. She looked to be about 17. She had dark, messy hair and wore an oversized hoodie, but when she turned her head to check for traffic, I stopped breathing. She had my eyes, the shape of them, the color. It was like looking in a mirror from 15 years ago. And she had my grandfather's stubborn, pointed chin. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was undeniable. The ache in my chest was so strong I almost sobbed aloud. I got out of the car, my legs feeling like jelly. I didn't want to scare her, but I couldn't wait another second. I walked up the sidewalk as she headed toward a bus stop. "Excuse me?" I called, my voice cracking. "Rose?" She spun around, defensive instantly. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you? Are you with social services?" "No," I said, stepping closer, tears spilling over. I think I'm your mother." I expected shock. I expected confusion. Instead, Rose let out a cold, bitter laugh that sounded far too old for her age. "My mother?" she scoffed, backing away. "Lady, my mother was a junkie who sold me for drug money. That's what the social worker told me my whole life. So unless you're here to pay me back, stay away from me." I managed to convince Rose to sit with me in a quiet diner nearby, mostly by promising to buy her the biggest meal on the menu. She ate like she hadn't seen food in days, eyeing me with suspicion over her burger. "Look," I said, sliding a worn leather folder across the table. "I don't know who told you I was a junkie, but they lied." I opened the folder. Inside were 15 years of missing posters, age-progressed sketches from the police, and letters I had written to her every birthday. I showed her a photo of her at age 3, wearing a dress I had sewn myself. "I never sold you," I said, my voice shaking. "I turned my back for 10 seconds and you were gone. I have spent every day since then looking for you." Rose stopped chewing. She looked at the sketches. One looked exactly like her current self. Her hard expression cracked, revealing a scared, confused child underneath. "If you were looking for me," she whispered, pointing a fry at me, "then who was the man in the gray suit, the one who came to the foster homes every year? He told the social workers he was a distant relative, checking in, just to make sure I was still in the system and hadn't been adopted." My blood froze. A man in a suit? Yeah, smelled like peppermint. He always made sure I stayed lost.
I set Rose up in a motel room nearby, paying cash so there would be no paper trail. I told her to lock the door and not open it for anyone but me. Then I drove back to my apartment, my war room, in a fury I had never felt before. I tore through my filing cabinets. I wasn't looking for bills to the trust. Caleb was too smart to bill a PI directly to the family accounts. I was looking for the corporate expense reports for the real estate company, which I technically owned a share of. I found the binders for consulting services. Caleb had been authorizing massive payments to a shell company called Holloway Security Solutions every year. I traced the dates. Every time he billed the company for on-site security, the dates coincided exactly with the days Rose said the man in the suit visited her foster homes. The realization made me nauseous. Mr. Holloway was a shady fixer my mother and Caleb used for eviction notices. They paid him to act as a jailer. He knew where my baby was for 15 years and watched me cry in his office while taking checks to keep her hidden. I grabbed my keys. It was time to pay Mr. Holloway a visit. Mr. Holloway's office was in a strip mall on the edge of town. It smelled like stale coffee and peppermint, just like Rose had described. I walked in channeling every ounce of defeat I could muster. I slumped my shoulders and kept my head down. "Tessa," he said, surprised, leaning back in his creaking chair. "I thought we were done. Caleb said you're signing the affidavit." "I am," I lied, my voice barely a whisper. I wanted to ask if you could give me the original case file, just for closure." Before he could answer, his cell phone rang. He looked at the screen and grimaced. It was Caleb. "I have to take this," he muttered. "Don't touch anything." He stepped out into the hallway, closing the door halfway to argue with my brother. That gave me maybe 30 seconds. I didn't go for the filing cabinet. I went for his desk. His daily planner was lying open. I flipped back a few pages. There, circled in red ink, was last Tuesday's date with the note, "Check-in, Oakhaven, all quiet." Then I saw it, a manila folder under a stack of magazines. It wasn't labeled Thorpe, it was labeled Thorpe Holdings. I flipped it open. A bank transfer receipt was stapled to the front. I took a picture just as I heard Holloway's footsteps returning. I thanked Holloway for his time and drove straight to the public library. I couldn't risk using my home internet. I pulled up the picture of the bank transfer on the library's secure computer and zoomed in. My heart stopped. The transfer was for $10,000 sent from Caleb's personal offshore account to a shell company registered to Holloway. The date on the transfer was October 14th, 2 days after Lily disappeared from the park. The timeline clicked into place with horrific clarity. Caleb didn't kidnap her himself, but somehow he found she was taken or found, and instead of bringing her home, he saw an opportunity. He paid Holloway to bury the lead. He paid to keep her in the system. This wasn't just a civil dispute over money anymore. This was kidnapping by proxy. It was fraud. It was a 15-year conspiracy to steal a child's life so he could steal her inheritance. I sat back in the hard wooden chair, trembling with rage. Caleb thought he had won. He thought I was the weak, emotional sister who would fold. He had no idea that I now held the weapon that would destroy him. But I needed one last piece of evidence to make it undeniable.
The next morning, I picked Rose up and drove her to a private medical clinic in the next city. We needed a legal chain of custody DNA test to stand up in court. The app notification wasn't enough. We needed scientific proof that no lawyer could shred. We sat in the sterile waiting room, the silence heavy between us. Rose was twisting the hem of her hoodie, looking at the floor. "Why?" she asked suddenly, her voice small. "If you didn't sell me, why did he do it? Why did your brother hate me so much?" I reached out and took her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. "He didn't hate you, Lily," I said, using her real name. "He loved money more than he loved people. There is $5 million waiting for you on your 18th birthday. He stole your childhood to get to that cash." The nurse called us back. We did the swabs. I paid the exorbitant fee for same-day emergency processing. When the email dinged on my phone later that afternoon, I opened it with Rose looking over my shoulder. "Probability of maternity, 99.999%. She let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 15 years. She looked at me, eyes wet, and for the first time, she saw me. "Okay," she said, "so how do we make him pay?" Before I tell you how I took this evidence to the police and set the trap for the final showdown at the birthday party, I have to ask, if you are rooting for justice for me and my daughter, please hit that like button. Share the story with anyone who loves seeing the underdog win, and subscribe so you don't miss the moment my brother gets exactly what he deserves. Also, tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven your family or would you destroy them? Let's get back to the story. I didn't go to the local police. I knew the chief played golf with Caleb every Sunday. Instead, I drove 2 counties over to meet with Detective Harrow, a state police fraud specialist I had found online. I needed someone with statewide jurisdiction who didn't play golf with my brother. I laid everything on his metal desk, the DNA results, the ancestry match, and the photo of the bank transfer. Harrow was skeptical at first. He looked like a man who had seen too many family squabbles. But when I pulled up the public records of Caleb's massive business debts, his demeanor changed. He leaned in, studying the transfer receipt. "This is hush money," Harrow said, his voice grave. "He didn't just hide a body. He hid a living child to facilitate wire fraud. That's a federal offense." "So you can arrest him now?" I asked, gripping the edge of the desk. Harrow shook his head. "Not yet. Right now, it's just intent. For the charges to stick, he needs to actually try to claim the money. He needs to stand in that room, present the affidavit, and force you to sign it while knowing the beneficiary is alive." He looked me in the eye. "You have to go to that party, Tessa. You have to let him think he's won. We'll be right outside." Driving back to town, my phone rang. It was Caleb. My stomach twisted into knots. But I answered. I had to give the performance of a lifetime. "Tomorrow is the birthday," Caleb said, skipping the hello. "I have the notary coming at 6. Are you ready to let go, or do I need to call the doctors?" I forced my voice to tremble. I let a little sob escape. "No, no doctors, Caleb. You win. I'm tired of fighting. I'll sign everything at the reading. Just make sure Mom is there. I want this to be over." There was a pause on the line. Then, Caleb let out a breath that sounded like pure relief and arrogance. "Finally," he said, his tone shifting to a sickening kind of glee. "You're doing the right thing, Tess. It's for the family. We'll be able to rebuild everything once this is done. See you at 6 sharp." He hung up. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. He wasn't thinking about rebuilding the family. He was thinking about saving his own skin. He had no idea that he had just set the time and place for his own destruction. The morning of the 18th birthday arrived with a gray, overcast sky. The family estate, a sprawling mansion that used to feel like home, now looked like a mausoleum. I parked my modest sedan between Caleb's sports car and the lawyer's luxury sedan. I walked inside. The house was quiet, prepped for the memorial and trust dissolution gathering. It felt like a funeral, but Caleb was dressed like he was going to a gala. He wore a crisp navy suit and a watch that cost more than my annual salary. Sylvia was checking the flower arrangements. She looked me up and down with a sneer. "You look terrible, Tessa. Fix your hair. We have witnesses coming." I took the abuse silently. I smoothed my skirt and checked my phone. I had sent a text to Rose 10 minutes ago. "Are you in position?" There was no reply. Panic flared in my chest. Had she gotten cold feet? Had Caleb found out? I had to force myself to breathe. I had to trust the plan. I walked into the library, the site of the execution, and took my seat. While I sat in the library trying to stop my hands from shaking, I thought about what was happening outside. I found out later that Detective Harrow had parked an unmarked van just beyond the estate's gate, and inside that van sat my daughter, Rose. She was apparently terrified. She was wearing a navy blue dress I'd bought her yesterday, a copy of the one I was wearing now. She watched the house through the tinted windows, clutching her seatbelt. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked the officer next to her. "My uncle, he's powerful. He always wins." "Not today," Detective Harrow told her, checking his firearm. "Today, he has no idea what's coming through that door. You just wait for the signal." Inside the house, the atmosphere was thickening. Mr. Sterling, the family lawyer, was wiping sweat from his forehead. He leaned over to Caleb, whispering loud enough for me to hear. "Are you sure she's going to sign? She's been acting strange. If she hesitates, the bank will pull the loan offer by morning." "She'll sign," Caleb said, glaring at me. "She knows what happens if she doesn't." The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 6 times. The heavy library doors were closed. It was just us. Me, Caleb, Sylvia, and Mr. Sterling. The air was so thick you could choke on it. Caleb stood up. He loved the sound of his own voice. He began a prepared speech about Arthur's legacy and the tragedy of loss. "It is sad that Lily isn't here to enjoy this," Caleb said, looking at the portrait of our grandfather with fake solemnity. "But we must be practical. We must protect the assets she would have wanted us to have. This is about closure." It was sickeningly hypocritical. He didn't care about Arthur's legacy. He had already squandered half of it. He sat down and slid the document across the polished oak table. It was the presumption of death affidavit. The notary uncapped a pen and set it down next to the paper. "Sign it, Tess," Caleb said, his voice dropping the nice act. His eyes were cold and hard. "End the misery. Sign the paper and let's move on." I looked at the paper. This was the moment. The trap was open, and he was standing right in the center of it. I reached for the pen. I held the pen, the metal cold against my sweaty palm. The room was so silent I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock. I looked at the document, then I looked up at my mother one last time. I needed to know, for my own peace of mind, exactly who she was. "Do you believe it, Mom?" I asked softly. "In your heart, do you really believe Lily is dead?" Sylvia didn't even look at me. She was picking a piece of lint off her skirt. "Tessa, please, we are not doing this again. Sign the paper so we can all go home." That was it. The final severing of the tie. She didn't care about the truth. She cared about the convenience of the lie. "Okay," I said, my voice suddenly steady. "I'll sign." I pressed the pen to the paper, but I didn't sign my name on the signature line. Instead, I drew a thick, heavy line through the words "presumption of death." Then, in the margin, in bold capital letters, I wrote 2 words, "Beneficiary present." I capped the pen with a loud click and slid the paper back across the table to Caleb. Caleb frowned, confused by my sudden confidence. He picked up the document, expecting to see my signature. When he saw the crossed-out clause and my handwritten note, his face went red. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, slamming the paper down. "Beneficiary present? Are you having a psychotic break? This is a legal document, Tessa, not a diary." I stood up. I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I felt taller than I had in 15 years. The unstable, grieving mother was gone. In her place was a woman who held every single card in the deck. "I can't sign a death affidavit, Caleb, because that would be perjury, and unlike you, I'm not a criminal." Caleb laughed, a nervous barking sound. "Criminal? You're delusional. Mr. Sterling, call the doctors. She's finally lost it." I looked at the grandfather clock. The minute hand clicked onto the 12. 6 p.m. "No doctors," I said, looking toward the heavy double doors of the library. "But you might want to answer the door. I think your niece is right on time." The library doors didn't just open, they were thrown wide open. But it wasn't the police who stepped in first. It was Rose. She walked into the room with her head held high, wearing the navy blue dress I had bought her, a dress that perfectly matched the one I was wearing. The visual impact was like a physical blow. She looked exactly like a young Sylvia, but with my eyes. The room went dead silent. Mr. Sterling dropped his pen. Sylvia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her glass of water tipping over and shattering on the floor. Caleb went pale, all the color draining from his arrogant face. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table. "Who is this?" Caleb stammered, his voice high and thin. "Who is this actress? This is a sick joke, Tessa. You hired someone to look like her." Rose didn't flinch. She walked right up to the end of the table, staring Caleb down with a ferocity that made me proud. "Hello, Uncle Caleb. I'm not an actress. I'm the girl you paid $10,000 to keep missing, and I'm here for my trust." Caleb lunged forward, panic taking over his reason. "You lying little brat! Get her out of here! This is fraud!" "The only fraud here is you, Mr. Thorpe." The command came from the hallway. Detective Harrow stepped out from the shadows, followed by 4 uniformed state police officers. Caleb froze. "Caleb Thorpe," Harrow announced, holding up a warrant, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice." "No," Caleb screamed, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. "You have no proof. It's her word against mine." Harrow held up his phone. "We picked up Mr. Holloway this morning. He realized very quickly that loyalty to you was worth 20 years in prison." He pressed play. The voice of Holloway filled the room, confessing to every single payment Caleb had made. As the officers cuffed Caleb's hands behind his back, he looked frantically at our mother. "Mom, do something! Tell them!" Sylvia, cold and calculating to the bitter end, turned her back on him. She smoothed her dress, distancing herself from the sinking ship. "I knew nothing about this," she said icily. "If he did this, he did it alone." An hour later, the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers illuminated the dark estate. I watched from the front porch as they shoved Caleb into the back of a squad car. Mr. Sterling was being questioned by the fraud unit near his luxury sedan. The grandfather's trust was secure. It was no longer a tool for Caleb's greed. It was legally Rose's future. I stood next to my daughter. She was shivering slightly in the evening air, and I wrapped my coat around her shoulders. She didn't pull away. She leaned into me. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "The bad part is," I promised her, "now comes the rest of our lives." We walked down the steps, past my mother who stood alone in the doorway of her empty mansion, and got into my modest car. As we drove away, leaving the toxic legacy of the Thorpe family in the rearview mirror, I realized something. They told me to move on. They told me she was dust. But they forgot the one thing about our bloodline they were so proud of. We don't break. We just wait for the right time to strike.
This story isn't just about a corrupt family or a missing child. It is a powerful reminder that the truth cannot be buried forever, no matter how much money you throw on top of it. Caleb Thorpe believed that he could control the narrative because he held the power and the purse strings. He mistook Tessa's grief for weakness and her silence for surrender. The lesson: never underestimate the quiet ones. Just because someone isn't screaming doesn't mean they aren't fighting. Tessa didn't win by being louder. She won by being smarter, patient, and methodical. In a world that tells you to move on and accept injustice, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand your ground, gather your evidence, and wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. Justice isn't always swift, but when earned, it is absolute. Thank you so much for following Tessa and Rose's journey from a shattered family to a triumphant reunion. It was an emotional roller coaster of betrayal and vindication, and we hope you felt every moment of their victory. If you enjoyed this story and love hearing about mothers who defy the odds to protect their children, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Tell us in the comments, do you think Tessa should let her mother, Sylvia, back into their lives eventually? Or should she cut her off forever for enabling Caleb? Type Team Tessa if you think she should leave the toxicity behind for good. See you in the next story.